Thank you. Hello and welcome. My name is Christina Mondini, and I am the Director of Product Management for Agentforce Customer Zero here at Salesforce. Why Customer Zero? Because just like you, our internal teams are also customers of Agentforce. This is our third event in this series where we explore how we use Agentforce within our customer success organization to improve customer experiences and boost team efficiencies. Today, we're focusing on a key ingredient for effective AI, knowledge design. We'll uncover how a well-designed knowledge base is enabling us to deliver Agentforce experiences that are helpful, reliable, and easy to use for both our customers and our internal teams. Now, before we begin, I want to start with a big and hearty thank you. Thank you for the gift of your time and joining us today. We truly value you being here and are so excited to share our insights and experiences with you. A quick reminder that Salesforce is a publicly traded company, so any purchasing decisions that you make should be based off of what is currently available. Now, I am thrilled to introduce today's speakers today. They have been at the forefront of driving better experiences for our customers through Agentforce. Zach, your deep understanding of data and the AI that powers these experiences, it's truly invaluable, even more valuable than that guitar collection behind you. Could you share with us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what excites you about this work?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Christina, and hello to everybody. Thank you for joining. Yeah, my name is Zachary Stauber. I currently lead what we call our digital success data and AI team here at Salesforce. And what we're really accountable for, think of us as the AI operations wing of what you see on the help portal today. So we really focus on things like instructions, prompt design, AI modeling, how we use data cloud, evaluations, a whole slew of things that make sure Agentforce is giving the right answer or the best possible answer to customers that use it. I've been at Salesforce for about 4 years now. I came by way of Microsoft. I was there for about a decade, kind of similar space, working in chatbots for a long time and things like that. And obviously generative AI has transformed how we explore, use things like chatbots or think about conversations with customers and how we help support. So it's very exciting. The thing I love most about it is that there's always something new every single day that's usually applicable to the space right away because of the pace of change. But yeah, absolutely love being here, and I'm super glad to talk to everybody.
Thanks, Zach. And next we have the brilliant Harak Vora, Vice President of Data Science. Harak, your expertise in data science has been instrumental in shaping the intelligence behind our Agentforce experiences. It's fantastic to have you here. Can you similarly tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Thank you so much, Christina, and hi, everybody. And thank you so much, Christina, for your generous choice of word. I'm not sure how much money I owe you, but happy to send you for the choice of word you used. Humor aside, here at Quora, I'm based out of Chicago, been with Salesforce for 8 years. I've been in this data space for about 20 plus years. And I lead our data team at Salesforce, primarily supporting customer success organization. We are constantly thinking about using our technology and AI and data science to solve problems that can improve the employee productivity and drive value for our customers. So we work on a lot of flagship projects internally, things like predicting a churn for our customers, driving satisfaction and success for our customer using customer success scorecard, also contributing with help.salesforce.com program that Zach and teams are leading. So happy to be here and sharing our lessons learned along in the journey. Back to you, Christina.
Great. Thank you both for being here. And as everyone can tell, we brought some heavy hitters for you today. So we're excited for you to learn from them. So now that we know a bit about our speakers, I'd like to turn it to our audience. I'd like to know about you and what's top of mind. You should all see a poll appear on your screen, and I do encourage you to participate because we want to make this experience as dynamic and as relatable as possible. And in order to do that, we have to know where you're at. This is completely anonymous. We're just going to share this in aggregate, but please do participate in this poll. And what we're asking is, what is your biggest challenge in delivering great customer service today? Is it handling high case volumes? Is it consistency in responses to customers? Is it being able to personalize at scale? Or maybe it's the good old keeping up with ever-evolving customer expectations. Whatever it is, we do want to hear from you. And like I said, your answers are anonymous. So let's see where we're shaping up. Okay, consistent and accurate responses across teams. Seems to be the overall winner. Okay, gotcha. Well, thank you for participating. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not surprised to see that that was the top response. And in fact, that was one of the main pain points we were having prior to moving to our Salesforce help experience that we that we have today. And before last October, when we started using Agentforce, this is what our help portal looked like. While functional, I mean, it's a perfectly good portal. It was even award-winning. We received a TSIA award for it. But we found that no matter the investments we were making in our websites, SEO, search optimization, meticulous organization on our site, our customers still weren't always able to find what they needed. And this isn't a small problem. Our website gets 60 million visits a year. This makes it one of Salesforce's largest portals. So this means if customers weren't able to find what they needed to find in the time that they wanted to find it in, well, they filed a support case, and that significantly added to our case volumes. So as you can imagine, the very thing meant to provide scalable help was actually driving more human support needs. So picture this. Our support portal contains 740,000 articles, over 18 languages, written by 12 different teams covering every single product and feature that we offer. It was overwhelming for our users, to say the least. We needed a way to cut through the noise, to take the burden off of the customer and find ways to improve the customer experience while also reducing support volumes. This is quite the challenge, and it sounds like all of you are in similar places. Zach, I'd love to hand this over to you. You were there, you were on the front lines, you saw what customers were experiencing. So how did you go about solving it?
Yeah, it's a great question, Christina. And aside from my fresh 5-month-old daughter keeping me up at night, this is the other big conundrum. I think let's start with where we knew we wanted Agentforce to deliver for us and what kind of where we are today. Like for number one, our top priorities, we wanted to be able to supplement customer answers as 24/7. We wanted to be able to provide consultation very easily from the page. We knew that the content needed to address the issues that customers were having, and it had to be trusted sources that we could ground on in Agentforce. And we also wanted it to be able to be autonomous, right? Like that's kind of the dream state, is how do we make sure that we're letting Agentforce or enabling Agentforce to be able to provide great answers autonomously to customers. So where are we today? Right now, we just hit 650,000 conversations since launching in October, which is fantastic. We're really, really excited about that. And we're at an 85% Agentforce resolution rate, which means customers who engage Agentforce and receive an answer, 85% of the time do not go on to create a case. And I'm going to share our scorecard later in the presentation with everybody, and we'll spend a little bit more time on here, but we're very transparent. We want you guys to be able to see and be a part of our journey and kind of learn for where we've come from and where we are. So how did we start here? I think this is the first tricky part, right? We knew what we wanted to be with Agentforce and how we wanted to get there. What we first then had to understand is what issues do our customers have today and what content are they already using? And this is really important. There's a common misconception, I think, as you explore this data cloud space, this Agentforce space, that more content equals better answers. And I think one of the things we learned very early is that more curated content equals better answers. And so like Christina mentioned, we had tons of content out there, tons of things that were available to customers across many different portals and domains. And we knew that we wanted to start simple and we wanted to start in the places that customers are already using. So for us, that was knowledge articles and help docs. And these are two very different types of content. Ideally, knowledge articles really focus on the sort of idea of just-in-time topics. These are things that we can turn around very quickly. Within 24 hours, we can have a knowledge article up on the site addressing a customer issue. This also follows a model that we use here at Salesforce called KCS, or Knowledge-Centered Service, which is the general idea that the smartest folks in the room that are most able to create content or solve the problem are your support engineers or people that are actually working with customers. And so this is a very fluid content type for us that we are really reliant on, as well as our customers. And they are designed to address what we call our top case drivers, so why customers contact or work with humans. The other one that's really important is help docs. And this would be inclusive of all of our product documentation, including things like how to support, kind of our manuals for how to actually use some of these features and capabilities that we have, as well as things like release notes, which are really powerful. We know customers love release notes, and we know that they use release notes. And I think we're on a quest to have Agentforce really be a great modality for release notes to make it even easier to consume down the road. But these are things that our customers rely on and also address top issues. And when we started looking at that piece, like what are the things that we want to make sure Agentforce is able to answer? These were the two content types that really stuck out to us. And we wanted to make sure that these were brought in to the fold so that we could actually use them with Agentforce. So what does that actually look like? This is where I go to Heroku and say, Heroku, I have now something for you to do in your not so busy day. And we started bringing things into Data Cloud. And Data Cloud is really the mechanism that we rely on to be able to ground Agentforce on all of the content streams, or structured data, unstructured data that you'll hear in general for how we use Agentforce today. So initially we started, like I said, very small back in October. We really focused on knowledge articles, which is about 177,000 in totality. So that's a pretty large number to manage overall. Release notes was a top priority for us. That's somewhere around 3,200, and then help docs in general around 37,000. So this is a lot of content to manage and really bring into the fold into Data Cloud. And the great thing about Data Cloud is that it enables us very easily and very quickly to harmonize metadata across these different asset types, to make Agentforce connected, build a really strong retriever strategy, which is some stuff that Harak's going to go over a little bit with you here in a little bit. And this is really the foundation for how we thought about grounded content fueling Agentforce answers. And of course, we're interested in growing. We want to keep adding more repositories, again, like based on the things that customers need and how those questions are.
Thanks, Zach. It's so helpful. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was interrupting you.
Back to you.
Okay, perfect.
No, back to you. You're good. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Zach. It's so helpful to see this practical application of knowledge design, because this is what we have actually used to power our AI interactions. And for everyone online, as you're listening to this, you might be thinking about your own content challenges. So to get a better understanding of the landscape out there, I'd love to launch into another quick poll. And again, your answers are anonymous, so please do participate. How would you describe your current approach to using data in your customer service operations? Are you just beginning to use data to help drive your decisions? Or are you collecting data, but maybe not using it effectively yet? Or are you at the stage where you're using data to improve some efficiencies and experiences, but there's still room for improvement? Or D, are you advanced? Are you fully leveraging data to personalize and optimize your service experiences? Go ahead and take a few seconds to respond. We'll give everyone just a moment. All right, let's see where we landed. Okay, looks like everyone is at C, or the most folks are. Actually, it's kind of distributed between that and the NB. So this is helpful to know. Everyone's kind of mid-range in their or most folks are mid-range in their journey. And it's always interesting to see where people are at. And the important thing is that no matter where you fall on this, what's important is that you're being intentional about wanting to use data to power more effective customer experiences. And for us, we're kind of where the bulk of you were at. We were at C, where we were using data to provide some efficiencies in our experiences. But now we're finally at the stage where we're starting to more fully use and optimize our service experience through data. That said, it's definitely been an ongoing, more iterative process as we hydrate more and more data into Data Cloud, like Zach was saying. Now, Harak, I'd love to bring you in here. Your team had quite a challenge. How did you go about turning the massive volume of content into what actually powers Agentforce to give solutions to our customers?
No, it's a great question, Christina. Thank you so much. I love the way you framed that question, that we definitely come a long way, and it's been a lot of learning journey along the way. So let's maybe go behind the scene and talk about all the data that Zach talked about. How do we curate and nurture the data and bring them into the Data Cloud? So anytime that you're talking about any AI data systems, you cannot not talk about the data first. That data is the secret ingredient that makes the AI system shine, makes it more smarter. And when you're talking about any data science or AI project, the first step is often to really prepare the data. That's the most important step. That's the one that takes most calorie. You got to be thoughtful about selecting your data sources. You have to be thoughtful about picking the right quality of the content that you are bringing in, as Zach talked about. A lot of our data or knowledge in this context come from a variety of different sources. And Zach talked about help center articles, release notes, developer documents, etc. But here is the one thing, though. A lot of our knowledge isn't really neatly structured in a database. It's actually unstructured. That makes it very tricky for AI models to use right off the bat. Well, you may ask why. What's so different and what's so tricky about it? Now, if you're working with very traditional data systems prior to AI system days, life was somewhat easier in the sense that you could have a relational database and a subject matter expert, often human, who knows how to query against it, what tables to hit, what relationship to look for, and the trained humans can develop this expertise to work with the database. Well, we are all in this mad rush to create autonomous AI agent that Zach talked about. So we no longer can afford this luxury. So when you're connecting your data and throwing it to the machine learning system to read from, it needs an access to both complete data, but also the inherent relationship and context that it carries. The ontologies of elements and metadata are very crucial for these AI models to thrive. And this is where the unified knowledge comes into the play. This is how we bring all our unstructured content together in one place and get it ready to be consumed by Agentforce. So essentially, unified knowledge becomes a single source of truth that houses our data, metadata, business logic, machine-generated insight, all of places at one place. So when customer asks this question in a chat window, the Agentforce isn't just pulling the outdated or generic information. It's actually using up-to-date curated knowledge that's highly relevant to the question that's been asked. So that's the step number one process. How do we select data? How do we store it? And how do we make it ready for our Agentforce? Let me go to the next slide. I talked about data in the previous slide. Let me also talk about the AI and model. And there has been a lot of advancement in the last couple of years with AI. You can't even buy a washing machine without either having an AI label on it. So we are definitely in very interesting and exciting era that we are in. So let's talk about the AI model. So I want to start by clearing up this common myth. You probably heard this many times that if you're trying to get a value from AI, you have to train your model or you have to build your machine learning model from the scratch. Well, it was certainly true in a past where you have to really look for classical machine engineering people and you lock them in a room for 6 months and they come out with great model. Well, there is still a need for this kinds of model in some niche use cases. Like we still do a lot of machine learning programming for our customer success scorecard, attrition predictor, internally, and things of that nature. But for the most part, you don't need to really write a model from scratch in the modern days, especially with the arrival of large language models. They are very capable of performing complex jobs such as text summarization, sentiment analysis, code generation, classification, all kinds of things, which are absolutely impossible to do a couple of years ago. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these large language models are actually pre-trained on a public data set. So what that means is it lacks the context and nuances about your business, your customer, your brand persona. So without this, if you were to just use the out-of-box generic LLM model, the responses that you may get back may be too generic or too impersonal, or models may just hallucinate in making the answer up for you with full conviction. And that's not what we want here. So in the next slide, let me talk about the introduction of the new concept where you can bring your data in the LLM to make your answers more relevant for your customer. So let's go to the next slide. Last slide, I talked about you don't need to have your own model. You don't need to really build a model from scratch. The way you actually make it more personalized by actually bringing your data into it, all your data that are actually stored in knowledge center, Salesforce ecosystem, you feed into the model. And this process is commonly known as grounding. So here is how it works. When you ask question, or an end user asks question through chat window, what is the return policy of an item that I just bought? Well, we don't send that query straight to the model and hope for the best. But instead, we use Data Cloud to search across all connected systems. Zach talked about all the documents, help documents, product documents, purchase history, both structured and unstructured, all those information that's actually collected, and we expose that information to the model. So model isn't just guessing, it's actually responding with real grounded and up-to-date knowledge. And this is how Agentforce start to act more like a human agent, not just your generic agent chatbot. So again, we are not training anything from the scratch. We're just making sure that the model sees the right context at the right time. And that's really the power of grounding. That's heart of what makes the Agentforce truly come to the life. Let's go to the next slide.
Actually, before you continue, sorry to interrupt. I want to make sure that both the audience and I understand. So basically what you're saying is that when we interact with Agentforce, potentially as a long-term Salesforce customer, if I've been a customer for a variety of years, you have more data on me. So if I ask a question, I'm going to get maybe a slightly different response, more tailored, more personalized than maybe if someone came to the portal and asked a question that was maybe not authenticated or was brand new to Salesforce. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Maybe the next slide is actually a great segue to really answer your question, Christina. So I talked about how we bring the data into the one place through a knowledge center. We talked about you don't need to really build your model. Your question is about how do we create differentiated experience for knowing the kinds of user that we're interacting with. So let's look at the under the hood. Let's go under the hood and think about how the Agentforce works and how it interacts with Data Cloud. So when the query from user comes in, and I know there's a lot of architecture diagrams and a lot of information on this slide, let me try to walk you through how it all works. So it all starts with a prompt. When you ask question or user asks question, we refer to that question as a prompt. And that starts off this reasoning process. And the first stop in this process is to really go to the trust layer, which ensure that query that's coming in, we can handle that query in responsible, safe, secure, and trustworthy manner. So things like if there are malicious query and intent to that, we want to filter things out. We can also program the trust layer to do a variety of different things. We can tell it like, hey, don't answer the questions about our competitor. We can say, don't answer the question about Christina's horoscope. We can do it many different ways to not safeguard against what we want, the Agentforce not to really answer those questions. So it's our gatekeeper before things move forward to the next part of the journey. When it reaches to the Atlas reasoning engine, which is kind of like a brain behind the entire Agentforce, when the query comes in, it involves a planner to really answer 3 questions. First question, what does the end user really want? What is the intent behind the question that's been asked? How do I reason with it? How do I actually plan execution around it? And then the third one is how do I go about solving that particular problem through right execution path? And that's what is all doing as a part of actually putting the plan together. Now, sometimes when it answers the question, it may not get it right the first try. And this is where the agentic loop comes in. If the answer isn't satisfactory, Atlas refines the context and tries again. And it tries over and over and again. And sometimes it's not able to solve the questions and you get the human intervention to really answer the question. But to answer your questions about how do we create differentiated experience between new customers versus old customer, well, we can all embed as a part of our Atlas planning question. We can instruct Atlas to look for specific pieces of content, like we can look into Data Cloud, Christina, for your example. Do we have an order history with you? Do we see the evidence that you have been interacting with us through call transcript, through phone transcript? What's the satisfaction with service that you probably have taken with us? If you are asking a question around support question about trying to learn about some product, we might look at your level of certification that you have so we can tailor our responses more adequately. If you are 3-star rangers with multiple certification with you, we might surface you an advanced piece of material for you to really look at versus someone who's new to our Salesforce ecosystem. We might surface very beginner level information for you to really look at. So this is all something that we can plan for with careful orchestration using programming done in Atlas engine and making sure that we have relevant pieces of content available in Data Cloud so that the Atlas can make sense of all that information at once. So hope that kind of makes sense and I answer your question in how the Atlas reasoning engine and Data Cloud all work together in trying to really figure out what pieces of information to extract and how to really piece together the answer that can be taken back to the end user. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on this purple box. Now, there's a lot happening within the Data Cloud. There are a lot of words here, the chunking, the embedding, the vectorization. So we're going to try to take a look at how do we actually architecturally and technically stage the data within the Data Clouds and make it readily available for Agentforce. So let's go to the next slide. Now, again, this is a lot of information on this slide. This assembly line that you're looking at is 5 steps of preparing your data in a Data Cloud. It's going to get a little bit more technical, so I'm going to try my best to make sure I can explain some of the concept. Now, you don't need to have PhD in AI, or you don't need to be experts in data engineering to be able to do a lot of work. Data Cloud actually makes it very easier so you can simply click your way through the setup. But I think the reason I think it's important for you to really understand some concepts so that you have an appreciation for what's happening behind the scene as you're clicking your way through this particular setup process. So step number one is what we call chunking. The large language models can't really handle the massive amount of data. They get overwhelmed. So we convert this, the knowledge articles or whatever the text we may be working with in a very smaller bite-sized pieces of information. It's almost like giving flashcards to the models versus throwing the entire textbook to the model and having it figure out. That's all we are doing here. But we're not also chunking it randomly. We are making sure that we do it very thoughtful way of actually slicing the content into smaller pieces, like things like we might want to keep the question and answers together, or we might want to keep header and footer of the knowledge articles together. So this is what all we do. And for your relevant content, I think you can employ different chunking strategies to see which one will give you the better output. But that's the step number one in this particular process. Step two, this is where we take the chunk and we transform them into the embedding. Another way to say that is a mathematical representation of its meaning behind the words that we chunk. I think the example that I can probably give you is when the query comes in that from end user that says, hey, I have a payment issue. And if we have a knowledge article that might be, say, something like billing concern, we want Agentforce to be able to connect those dots. Although the word payment and billing are somewhat different in nature, but we want that connection to be drawn because it's very relevant for our use case. That's all we are trying to do. We are now trying to really create this embedding model to provide a right context and meaning that machine learning can actually employ. Now, the another example I can probably give you, just so that illustrate this concept, is when children are starting to learn how to speak, over a period, they start to understand the meaning of each word they learn. So things like they may say milk and start to associate the word milk with hunger. That's all happening here. And embedding is the most crucial steps in the entire process. You want to make sure you're staging your data correctly. Now, you can use a lot of open source models that we are making it available as a part of our product. You can use OpenAI or Hugging Face, or you bring your own models to create your embedding that's relevant for your use case. Next up, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Once we create those mathematical representation of the embedding, we needed a place for it to be stored. We use VectorDB in Data Cloud to store it. You can't use a relational database to store those information. So it's a VectorDB we use. Think of that very simplistic. We just want that information that we created to reside in a format so that our machines can actually read from it. That's what we are doing storing that information in a vector database. Next, the fourth step in a process is called indexing. Now, indexing kind of works like a high-speed lookup table, or sort of like your table of contents at the beginning of your book. If you are trying to read a chapter number 4 in your book, well, you're not going to scan through every page until you find your chapter 4, right? You typically will go to the beginning of the book, look at your table of content and say, hey, what is the page that chapter 4 starts from? And you jump straight to the chapter 4. That's kind of what's happening here, but it's slightly more complicated because you can use so many variation of index, so many ways that you can scan table of content. That's all happening within the index, that you are now making sure that the Agentforce can query against these tables, and you have a quicker way of retrieving the information that can be surfaced back to Agentforce. And the last step of the process is called RAG. Something you might have heard if you're following the internet or LinkedIn, retriever augmented generation. So when someone asks question, all that's happening is like, what is the written policy if you're an item that I bought, for example? System is basically pulling the relevant chunks from the index, right? Just working backward. Going to the index is saying that, hey, here is a chunk that I created that contains the answer to the question that's been asked. Chunks are sent back to the LLM. LLM receives all this information, packages that up, and shares back with the customer in a nicer manner. Now, this may sound like a lot, but here's the base part. Again, I said it at the beginning of the slide. You really don't need to build any of that from the scratch. And Data Cloud, NR pipeline handling, chunking, embedding, vectorizing, indexing, retrieval, that all is actually doing pretty easily behind the scene. So all you have to think about, what data do I want to bring? What data do I want to expose, which will allow me to answer the question to my customers much more accurately, personalize the experience that can offer differentiation to your customer, and you're off and running. So it looks more like an advanced AI. It's been so simplified that you can actually start using all of the systems without actually needing an ML engineer.
Well, Harak, to interrupt you for a second, I mean, even though I'm not an engineer, I mean, it's not a free for all, for example, right? Hypothetically, I couldn't go into Agent Builder and, I mean, you brought up horoscopes earlier. I couldn't tell it to give customers their horoscopes as part of their answer, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think knowing you, Christina, you're the one who should never be allowed to touch anywhere near the Data Cloud Agentforce. So please don't do that. While you don't need an engineer to set these things up, Data Cloud makes the process so straightforward and intuitive that even without the technical knowledge, as I mentioned, you can still implement and take advantage of all those AI-powered insight. It's designed for business users to get up and running quickly without to do any heavy lifting on your part. And this is the power of the Salesforce Data Cloud and Agentforce working together. Okay, all right, so this is probably my last slide. And this is where I talked about a lot of different concepts. So give me thumbs up, thumbs down if this kind of makes sense to you. But this is really the slide that brings the entire Data Cloud and Agentforce together. If you look at the slide on the top, the flow in the number 1, this is what all happens in Data Cloud. I talked about we have a variety of different content and knowledge. We synthesize all this content, and then we prepare data pipeline so that we can curate the data, stage it through chunking and extraction and embedding process, and store it into the vector database so that the Agentforce can actually read from. Now, you want to make sure as you're creating this workflow, you are not making your data become stale. So as Zach talked about, the knowledge and contents are constantly being authored. We want to make sure this flows remain relevant. We refresh it once a day. I think we would probably like to do it more often than that, but that's a part of your designing strategies and data preparation strategy to make sure you're keeping this information fresh and relevant for your customer. And live retrieval flow is how Agentforce connects with data flow. At the risk of repeating myself, just to kind of make sure everyone understand how that all interacts together, when the query is fired by an user or question is being sent to us, we take the questions and we convert into this user query, or things like, what is the return policy of an item that I just bought? That query is embedded and sent to the Data Cloud. Data Cloud then uses the index to figure out what my right relevant chunk is. Chunk is another way to say that what pieces of words and blocks contains the piece of information that I need to be able to answer my user's question. And then we package that information back up and show it to the customer. And everything is actually going through the Einstein trust layer to make sure responses are delivered safe. They are meeting all the ethical standards that we are employing as a part of our construction of the product. And that's all really happening. And this is how the agents in Data Cloud working together in harmony. With that, Christina, back to you.
Thanks, Rock. I really like how this slide brings it all together. But something that's on my mind, and I wonder if it's on our viewers' minds, is how do we know if it's working well? I hear our customers ask all the time about they want to make sure that we can ensure the quality of the answers coming from Agentforce. And when I get these questions, the person I normally turn to is Zach. Zach, you've taught me so much about how we assess answer quality internally. Can you share with those watching a bit of how we do this behind the curtain?
Yeah, totally. This is my favorite part of my job, actually, is kind of figuring this out, because like all of you, I'm sure, or like many of you rather, we didn't really know initially where to start, how to even think about this, what was a good answer, what was a good experience. Those are things that are kind of up in the air. And so what we really rally around was, what are the things that matter most to us that we want to make sure our customers get? Number one thing my team cares about, highest priority, is removing failed conversation possibilities. And so this is really looking at things like making sure Agentforce is giving the highest quality answer possible through our knowledge design. Do we have the right set of data and content coming into Data Cloud so that we can generatively provide a great response to customers to answer those questions? Like, what does that actually look like? We also wanted to make sure that the sentiment was good. Like, do customers actually like using Agentforce. I think that's another really big opportunity for us to really understand. Today, we do this conversationally. We ask you to like rate your experience after you are using, like while you're in Agentforce using it. Is that the best methodology? Are there other ways to get that sentiment from customers? But that's really important. And then lastly, the big piece also in this kind of three-legged stool of awesomeness that is our Agentforce implementation is performance and KPIs. So what we really think about in this is, do we have the right observability metrics or the right latency understanding? What's our time to respond? Are we actually up and running consistently? Are we erring in certain places? Those kinds of things are really important for my team as well, because you may have great knowledge design and make great input of content and structured data and things like that to help facilitate great responses, but maybe you're not necessarily giving it in the best, most efficient way possible. So these are kind of the three areas where we really wanted to focus in terms of how we design our business and how we're using Agentforce. And kind of my second favorite part of the job is throwing a wall of numbers at people. But here is our scorecard. So this is how we look at it here at Salesforce. And this is like the space where my team is accountable. Kind of three areas I'll point you to. And I saw some questions kind of in this vein, so happy to dive deeper in Q&A if this comes up. I'll point out three kind of key areas for us in general. Number one is usage. That's our top priority. Right now, we are only exposing Agentforce to, it's available to everybody that comes to the site today, but we know that we need to increase that usage overall. Especially, we have 1 million sessions, help sessions per week. 2.7% of those sessions result in an Agentforce conversation. When we started back in October, that number was like less, like it was 244 conversations in a week. So we've grown tremendously, and we're going to continue to find more ways to increase that footprint of how customers are interfacing. Once you start getting customers to use it, then the next big thing is resolution rate. Is it actually solving problems? We think about this in two ways, and I would highly recommend and encourage folks on the call to think about this with your own businesses as well, is we evaluate resolution rate as implicit or explicit, meaning is it behavioral or are customers telling us that we did okay? So when we say resolution rate, that's a behavioral metric, meaning we gave an answer to a customer in the conversation, and that customer did not go on to create a case. That implicitly says that Agentforce did what it was supposed to do. Then conversationally, we also ask customers, hey, we just gave you an answer. Did this solve your problem? And so that's an explicit response to that survey question. You can see here that we're hovering in that 84-85% range for resolution rate, and we're seeing pretty similar rates from the confirmed customer resolution rate. And then the last big thing I'll say is escalation rate. I know that's top of mind for a lot of folks here. Escalation rate is really interesting because this is the amount of conversations that result in being handed off to a human for additional support. That could be for a lot of reasons. We actually believe that humans add value. This is part of the Salesforce motto, like humans in the loop. You'll hear this a lot. Humans add value to a lot of our customer interactions and conversations. So our goal isn't necessarily to stop customers from getting to a human, but we want to make sure that it's relevant, it's the right time to go to a human, and it's contextually accurate when it does pass to a human. So we monitor escalation rate very closely. With that, there's some learnings with all of this, right? I think initially when we launched in October to where we were probably in the last month or so, we were really focused on knowledge, right? This is what we kind of consider the brain of the piece. Accurate answers as much as possible, really having a great knowledge design into data cloud and architecture of how we want to use all of our structured and unstructured data. We're really focused on that side of it. As we look to the future, in particular, what we're really starting to lean on is now what we refer to as the heart. And this is things like, how do we bring more empathy into Service Cloud? Or excuse me, how do we bring more empathy through our Service Cloud into Agentforce and things like that? How do we have more service-centric principles as we design experiences and how we provide answers using that structured and unstructured data? And so a lot of what you'll see, and I'll share with you our roadmap here, is really about that. It's how do we bring in more personalization or contextualization? This is a really big area of emphasis for us right now to make sure that it feels like when you're using Agentforce, it's more unique to you and you can actually experience and see that. Language expansion is also coming. I'm happy to say that we'll be launching in Japan in the summertime right now, which is really great. And I'm sure that's going to be a whole other session in the future. If you're interested in learning more about that, give us some thumbs up emojis so we can dive into that, because that's a really exciting space that I think unblocks a lot of potential momentum with Agentforce. And then we also think that voice is going to be the new UI. Like, we think that that's a really great modality to interact with a lot of these generative capabilities. Having conversations with a agent, that can go back and forth with you while you're solving your problem. And then underlying all of that is, of course, again, how do we know that it's working? Back to the original question, how do we know that all of these things are doing what we want it to do? Again, if you guys are interested in learning more about that, give us the thumbs up. Happy to do future sessions potentially on those topics, but because that's a really, like I said, that's my favorite part of the job. But with that, I think, Christina, back over to you for some potential Q&A.
Yeah, here we go. I am loving all the emoji reactions. Please keep using them. They give us energy as we're talking because we can't see you. So please do use those emojis liberally. That was an incredible presentation, Zach and Harak. Thank you so much for this. We have so many real life examples and nuggets of wisdom that our customers can continue to think about. So I'm sure this has sparked some good questions from our audience. So let's open it up for Q&A. For everyone on the call, if you haven't done so already, please submit your questions through the Submit a Question widget. We're eager to hear what you want to know. So let's see what we have for Zach and Harak. Okay, question one. The first one's for Zach. Sorry, Zach, you don't get a break. Can you get deeper into vectorizing and how we can leverage those embeddings for storage and more accurate? This seems like it's more for Harak, actually. So let me start over. Can you get deeper into vectorizing and how we can leverage those embeddings for storage and more accurate RAG between our org's knowledge database? Can it be connected to the internet's larger databases of knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. And I think one of the things that everyone is going to really realize that there isn't really one answer. Each of the steps that I talked about, you're constantly tweaking it and really adjusting and fine-tuning it. It's a never-ending process. You're always going to get better, and you're going to find and stumble upon something that you broke along the journey as well. And we have a lot of lessons that we learn in the process as well. So there isn't really one recipe that I can give you that's going to work, but there are some general guidelines that you can probably follow. So one, when you're creating the embeddings in vector store, make sure you are using the right embedding model. There are OpenAI, as I mentioned, there's the Hugging Face, Cohere. Make sure you are able to really convert your documents in the embedding that is appropriate for your use cases. And it's a question of just playing around, as I mentioned. Something will work well. Make sure you are making sure you're adding metadata to it. So document source, URLs, text, timestamps. These are all things that are required for better filtering, traceability, relevance that AI needs. It's the context and metadata that it really differentiate the experience. And when you think about building the accurate RAG system, there are a lot of practices that you can follow. Chunk wisely. I think I saw another question around how do I chunk it. Chunk wisely, like rule of thumb, 200 to 500 words or sentence based. Don't add long text as a part of your chunking strategy. Avoid cutting up concepts, make thought, make sure it's a coherent and complete sentences that you're putting out there. Do not include, deduplicate, clean your data set. Make sure you do all of the prep work before you start embedding it. Make sure you're using semantic metadata for filtering. Make sure you're using combination of multiple searches. As I mentioned, there are multiple ways for you to do the indexing. Make sure you're using hybrid search, keyword search, whatever is more relevant for your use cases you're working with. And then I think the question was around, can I also use the Internet of the Things and source the information before? Yeah, you can absolutely do that. You can use things like LangChain agents to go retrieve the information ahead of the time or on the time of the call, or things that we also do it by scrapping the API, using APIs, the Internet. Retrieve all the information in offline manner, so you have a better control of the quality that you're working with, and you can eliminate the risk of actually serving up some document that may not meet your quality standards or ethical standard. So we use a lot of that information, the public-facing materials, create the offline store, ingest it ahead of the time. So you can definitely use and invest in those methods to scrap, clean, chunk, and embed your results. So hopefully that kind of makes sense, and we can take that. If there are more follow-up questions, just send my way.
Thanks, Harak. I smell a best practices slide coming. I think we should probably create one based off of all of that knowledge that you just gave us. So thank you. That's so good. Okay, next one is for Zach. How do you go about accurately measuring the 85% case deflection? Customers don't give feedback on every interaction. So how do you know that they're just not giving up if they don't find the knowledge article that they need?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I actually might change a little bit, position it as we don't call it deflection by design. We call it resolution rate. And so, like I mentioned, I think that's key, right? Because it is, admittedly, it is tough. We had to go connect dots with things like Google Analytics. We use GA on our site for a lot of our kind of events across the platform, for example. So we can actually see, like, if a customer comes in, they launch Agentforce, we know when they actually get an answer from Agentforce versus, say, a system message prompt such as, I don't understand your question, can you provide more info? And like the customer walks away. Those are things that we consider abandons versus actual resolutions. So we know when Agentforce provides an answer, and we know when the customer doesn't engage again with Agentforce or go into multi-turn kind of situations. And then we can connect that conversation in that session, messaging session is what it is, on the help session, and we can see where they go from there. And then all of that aggregated data gives us really confident insight that the behaviors or the happy path through our journey, if you can imagine, is actually checking all the boxes for customers. And so we have to connect our BI teams. We work with our BI teams really, really closely to connect these spaces into things like Tableau dashboards. Of course, we use Tableau here at Salesforce so that we can monitor and analyze these on a regular basis. And then my team has a really strong function in this evaluations wing that we refer to as evaluations operations, which is basically we use LLMs to judge conversations. Actually, it's very meta, so hang in there. But we actually use Agentforce to judge whether or not Agentforce is giving good answers or not, based on success criteria and those kinds of things. And then we have a secondary answer quality metric that we maintain that really outlines and evaluates if the answers are of high quality, that we of course then spot check with humans. And so between all of this aggregated portal data and then our actual evaluations program, we feel very confident that we know that behavioral number of 85% reflects the current state of how customers are using Agentforce.
Great. Thank you, Zach. That's great. That's great to give them a peek behind the curtain, because your organization does all of that, right? Having a title like data and AI doesn't really get into all of what your team does. So thank you for sharing. Our next question, I actually think, is for both of you. So y'all decide which of you wants to answer this, but they're looking for some best practices around formatting content in Salesforce knowledge articles for better AI chunking. What are some practical tips that we can take back to our knowledge authors on how we can write and format our knowledge articles so that they are both easy for end users to read, maintain, and ingestible by AI? Who wants to take that one?
I can take it, and Zach, you can add your colors to that. Okay, so there are a lot of best practices. I think the first one is you want to chunk your content by concept, not by length. What I mean by that is you keep your relevant topics intact. So things like, how do I reset my password? So that's your topic. You do not want to have the first step in the first document and how you solve or reset the password being in a second document. You make sure you're keeping that concept together in one document. That's a job. That's probably the rule number one. Then the second thing is you think about what's the right chunk size. And as I mentioned, I think typically 100 to 300 words sounds about right. General rule, 1-3 paragraph or 200 to 500 tokens per chunk is what you probably should really look for. Make sure you are preserving the right titles and metadata for all the contents as well, meaning your article's title, section headers, the tagging, the footers, URL, the timestamp when it was last created or modified. These are all information that are actually very crucial for retrieval of information, so we can feed that up-to-date information into the Agentforce. And make sure you are also spending a lot of time in actually cleaning up your sources. So deduplication is a big part of it. Don't include a lot of abbreviation, things like RAG, don't say that, call retrieval augmented generations, and spell that out clearly so that model can understand that. And the cleaner the data is, I think that's probably the secret sauce. So there isn't really a lot you can do scientifically. Just make sure you're feeding the good high quality content before you get to the chunking and embedding stage. Zach, you want to add something?
Yeah, totally agree. I think you hit a lot of the points I would say too. The big learning, this is a big challenge. First off, acknowledging and validating the question. We have spent, I'm sure many of folks on this call have spent the last decade plus optimizing for things like SEO through Google or visual consumption. And now very quickly we have to optimize for agentic consumption, which I don't even know if that's a real phrase yet in the industry, but that's the important part, right? So I think that our big learning is intent is everything. And again, it goes back to something I said at the beginning, which is there's a common misconception, I think, as you approach AI and knowledge curation in general, that more data equals better answers. And the reality is that more curated data equals better answers. For example, I'll just share just a little bit about a challenge that we work through. Password reset. It's a big challenge for us from a case volume perspective. A lot of customers, as you can imagine, ask this question. Today, if you go to help and search for password reset, you're going to see a lot of content return, a lot of different articles across different product types, different things. That's what we've referred to internally as a content collision, meaning that these are different or disparate, to Rock's point. Like sometimes the question is on a different page than from the answer. And so we have a big effort underway. There's a lot of ways to solve that, but just having clean, healthy data as you ingest into Data Cloud is really the right post. So like our goal is to try to figure out how to bring all these things together into a more simultaneous or cohesive set of content so that Agentforce can just find that really quickly and return it at a high rate of accuracy. And that's a little bit of Data Cloud. That's a little bit of content design. That's a little bit of AI modeling, potentially, and Atlas reasoning engine kind of work. So there's a lot to that, but this is definitely a big challenge that we're still exploring and learning as we go along the journey too.
Thanks for sharing that, both of you. Love that we can all come together on these questions too. This next question's for Zach. How do we assess high areas of failure versus just looking at abandoned from an agent conversation? Are you using any feedback data or sentiment analysis to try and identify this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. This is a great question. So we think of failed conversations as two things. One, any conversation that Agentforce gives an unacceptable answer for. That's a little broad. But it's kind of intentional, right? Because sometimes we can give a really high quality answer and still go on to a human, right? Because again, we don't view humans, like the handoff to human, as necessarily a negative thing. So what we think of is anytime Agentforce doesn't give an acceptable answer is really what we think of as failed conversations. That can be because Agentforce didn't understand the question, and so it should. Maybe we need to disambiguate, or we need to add more clarity in how Agentforce responds, or maybe there's missing pieces of information. There's a lot of things that kind of spin to that. And that's different from an abandonment per se, because how we think about abandons is if we ask the customer to come back and engage with us to provide more information or give us some of that additional context that we're unable to get ourselves based on what we know about the customer and that interaction, and they leave that conversation, that's what we consider to be an abandon. So anytime we give the customer an answer grounded on content that's in our Data Cloud instance or grounded on some kind of structured data that's in our Data Cloud instance, we consider that to be a successful conversation at the end. And then we look at its relevancy, completeness, and accuracy kind of after the fact from there. And then just to kind of touch on the sentiment piece. Yeah, so conversationally today, we do ask a CSAT survey, customer satisfaction survey, in the flow of the conversation. We're very interested in moving to a more simple UI, non-conversational format based on some research that we've done with customers. They like thumbs up, thumbs down concepts we think are really going to resonate well with our customers. And then we're also super interested, and we've just kind of started this journey of using the built-in sentiment analysis things and pieces of conversation. The tough part we run into is that oftentimes I think, the average inputs from customers in conversations today is pretty small. And so it's hard for a sentiment analysis model to really grok that and say, oh yeah, this is positive, this is negative, versus like a human chat transcript experience, for example. So anyways, so we're still exploring what the right way to approach that is, but we're definitely open to it for sure. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, no, I think it definitely does. And this next one's for you, and then I think maybe Harak as well. So as I've seen done on our scorecard quite a few times, it looks like people are trying to do the math. So they're realizing that if it's an 86% resolution rate, what happens to that 14%? Does that mean it's the 14% become cases? So if that's true, then where does the 4% escalation come from? So can you help kind of dive in so that people can do the math?
Absolutely. So the delta is between the escalation and the resolution is actually abandons, to be honest with you. So that's where customers initiate a conversation on help today. It's actually interesting. The culture of how customers are using Agentforce is growing at the same rate that we are, if this makes sense. Like when we first launched Agentforce on help, we saw a lot of curiosity. And so if you were to go back to October numbers, for example, the customers we saw would click on it, see it launch and go, and we presume would say, oh, that's cool, and then close the window, right? Not actually ask a question or anything like that. So again, it's that 10% number is, sorry. And as Agentforce has become more sophisticated on help, and as we've grown our capabilities and things like that, the abandonment numbers are actually changing in terms of how customers engage. So what we really think of is that delta, that 10%, just using that math there, that 10% delta is customers who ask a question and engage, or don't ask a question, never even get to that point. And then we ask for more clarity or ask them to engage with us again, but they choose to leave the conversation instead. There's a lot of different scenarios for that. And I think it's really important to do like a journey mapping exercise as you think about going after your metrics and how you're thinking about measuring success. I would encourage everybody to do like a little bit of a journey. What are your successful outcomes, or an outcome mapping exercise, and how you want to treat every single one of those. We did a very similar thing, and we went through a whole long list of all the possible outcomes for an Agentforce conversation and how we wanted to count that or be accountable for those things. And that's kind of where we landed. So the idea is if we ask you to engage and you don't come back to us and leave the conversation, and we know that you didn't go on to, say, create a case or do something else connected to that Google Analytics data that we use, then we have a pretty good high confidence that you're in that abandoned category. Hopefully that answers the question.
It does. And we do get this question a lot. And I really want to reemphasize what you said around figure out what your outcomes are, and then figure out what the measurements are to achieve those outcomes, right? And just because what you see on our scorecard is what we measure for, it doesn't mean we have the same outcomes as you do. So I'd encourage you to do that journey exercise that Zach said. All right. We have time for one last question. This is our last one, and it's for Harak. Do we need to manually update in the embedding process? Meaning, how does the tool learn the ontology to be as accurate as possible?
No, I think it's a great question. I think it's a two-part question. One, do we need to continually manually update the embedding process? I think the general answer is no. You don't have to manually update the embedding, but it's very simple. If your underlying content changes, you have to re-embed. So as frequently as your knowledge changes, the source changes, you'll have to figure out a way to really keep your embedding up to date with the content so it can reflect in the answer creation. So it all depends on the content changes or how often do you author new content. I think the second question is around how does the tool learn the ontology? So a couple of ways to really think about it. When you are using these embedding models, such as OpenAI's or Hugging Face embedding model, these models are actually trained with a lot of large-scale data set. So it does carry a general understanding of some of the domains that are publicly available, and that you can use to see how well it will perform with your data set. But if you're in a very niche industrial structure where this embedding model may lack the general awareness about your domain, then you have a couple of choices in that case. One, you have to write your own embedding model. So in other words, you're going to have to augment your data sets by some third-party source or manually enriching that data set with more context, more relevant information that you need to provide, and create your own embedding model so that you can then have the right ontology and relationship that you can derive from. But generally speaking, I think the OpenAI's models and Hugging Face model tend to do a good job with, unless you happen to be in exceptionally niche industrial areas where you have to write a very domain-specific the ontology creation model. So I think with that, I think we're at the time. So back to you, Christina.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So many great questions. Thank you for your engagement and for spending time with us. And thank you for those emoji reactions. If you have any follow-up questions or need additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to help. And we're excited to continue this journey and look forward to seeing you in our next webinar, where we'll dive deeper into how the UX choices that we've made have driven even better Agentforce adoption and more success for our customers. And with that, let me send you off. I wish you a beautiful day, and we'll see you next time.